Hello and welcome to Public Policy Analysis, PLS 313. I am your instructor, Melanie Bowers, and I will be guiding you on this learning tour of public policy analysis. So let's get started. Today, what we are going to do is do first a brief introduction of the class and the instructor. Then we are going to highlight a couple of the main points of the course design and requirements. These are things that are found in the syllabus, which I highly recommend that you read thoroughly. But I want to also make sure that you are familiar with this information, whether you read it or not. So we're going to go over the highlights. And then we're going to do a quick glance at the course website. So I am your instructor, Melanie Bowers, as I said. I am a fifth-year doctoral candidate in the Department of Political Science here at Michigan State University. I study public policy, minority politics, and urban politics, and I am currently working on my dissertation. My dissertation looks at essentially what allows cities to be successful, what allows them to respond to problems as they arise. And this is the second time that I have taught this course. It's a course that I actually really love because I think that it is both intellectually interesting and professionally useful. And so hopefully you will find it that way as well. So the first question that we should ask when we're beginning to think about policy analysis is this overarching question of what is policy? And at first, I think that this seems like a pretty straightforward question. And in some ways it is. We've all watched the news or heard about something that involved the word policy. But it can also be a pretty vague term. So Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines it as this. So it's a definite course or method of action selected from among alternatives and in light of given conditions to guide and determine present and future decisions. And the parts that I have highlighted are the things that are really important and that you should focus your attention on, right? This is what policy analysis at its core is about, right? It's about looking at a particular problem, looking at what should be done to actually address that problem. And so we look at the course or the method of action that is best to address an issue. We look at the alternatives that are available to address that issue. We look at the conditions and the context on the ground. What is the best way to deal with this issue, not just in an ideal world, but in the actual world that we live in. But in the end, it boils down to the decisions that we make, right? So this is a decision process. And so for our purposes, we're going to focus on formal government policy at the national, state, and local levels. Now, I want to be clear that policy can be anything, right? It can be in any type of institution. So you might have a policy in your home if you live with roommates. Okay, our policy is that we don't let the dishes pile up for more than a day. Or you might work for a company that has policies. You have a sexual harassment policy. You have a dress code, perhaps. So these are policies in other institutions, but for this class, we are focusing on public policy, which is policy that is directed and produced by the government. And so, a really important question, the foundation of sort of understanding how policy develops, is understanding why we have policy in the first place. And if we listen to the media, there are competing explanations of why we have policy. So if you listen, for example, to Republicans, there is a notion that government is trying to control our lives and that government intervention is unnecessary. If you listen to the Democrats, there's a sense that government is the solution to many problems and that the government is best equipped to control behavior in a way that positively affects society. The reality is probably somewhere in between, right? So we have policy to address specific issues that arise in society. And we're going to go over those issues now. So the first one is that there are political reasons, right? So for example, You might have something, an issue that didn't used to be an issue, but there's been a change in public opinion and geopolitics. There might be economic pressures, etc., that require the government to act. So, for example, when we developed a lot of the policy around 9/11 and Homeland Security, right, there was a change in our geopolitics, and all of a sudden there was something that we identified as necessary to address. Okay. Another part of this is a moral or ethical reason. And so these are issues where we fundamentally believe that society needs to do or not do something, and that needs to be enforced, either to protect other people, to protect the environment, to protect society at large. The goal here is to protect somebody from somebody else's immoral or unethical behavior. And so there are many examples of this. For example, child abuse or domestic violence laws. These are developed because we identify child abuse and domestic violence as unacceptable parts of human behavior, something that needs to be stopped and regulated. Other examples include labor laws. We don't think that it's okay to work children for 12 or 13 hours a day. Antitrust laws, right? We don't believe that it's okay for businesses to behave in ways that we identify as unethical by developing monopolies and so forth. And so we say, okay, humans make poor decisions as individuals and sometimes as groups. And so we need a higher structure to regulate that behavior so that it doesn't affect somebody else negatively, right? If you want to abuse yourself, that's one thing. We may not approve of it, but we're not necessarily going to regulate it either. But you cannot abuse somebody else, for example. Okay, our next reason why we have policy are economic reasons. And these have to do with things like market failures. So, for example, there's a concept of externality, which you do not need to be familiar with at this point. We're going to talk about it in much more depth as we move forward in the class. But an example of an externality is that pollution is caused, for example, by coal production. There's pollution created by many industrial uses. But the reality is that pollution isn't incorporated into the cost of coal. So the cost of coal includes the value of that coal, the price or the amount of money it takes to get that coal out of the ground, paying staff and marketers, paying the miners, paying the CEO, giving shareholders dividends, all of those things. But what is not accounted for is the pollution that ends up being created from the mining and the burning of coal for energy purposes. And so who pays for that? The coal companies are making money off of this product, the people are getting electricity, but the market is not accounting for the cost of that pollution. And so the government, in situations like that, oftentimes develops policy to try and regain some of the cost of these negative things that affect society as a whole. There are other things, though, within economics, such as collective action problems. So, for example, what we know about human behavior is that people oftentimes don't act as if they believe that somebody else is going to act on their behalf, right? As a collective, we are not likely to do what we're supposed to be doing. So, for example, we hear occasionally in the news that a person will die in a full waiting room because of an emergency room because nobody went and got the nurse, right? And this is a collective action problem because everybody in the room assumes that somebody else is going to take care of that problem. And when these sorts of things happen, right, there are things that need to happen that wouldn't happen if we left it up to sort of everybody else to just take care of, because the assumption would be, oh, hey, Joe down the street is going to take care of it. You might think of this, for example, with snow plowing. So you might live in a close-knit community that would take care of plowing if there wasn't a government, a city-run truck coming down the street. But the chances are that people would plow their individual driveways, and maybe they would plow what they needed to get out of the street, which may or may not help the others. But the reality is that there would be a fair number of people who would say, hey, I'm going to just hang out until somebody else plows that driveway, right? Somebody else is going to take care of this problem. And what that might mean is that people stay snowed in until the snow melts or gets packed down. And so we provide goods and services to address that sort of issue, right? So examples, police protection, cleaning up litter, snow removal, etc. We also have common pool resources, and these are things that we can't exclude people from, but we also have issues about who's going to take care of them, who's going to make sure that they are accessible to everyone, etc. And so an example of this is water rights. So we have water that's all around us, but we have to make sure that that water is maintained and that it arrives when we need it to arrive, that it's clean, etc. And so we can't just count on everybody to take care of the water, right? We need somebody to organize and make sure that those things happen. And so we develop policy to make sure that, one, those people who need access to the water have access to it, and two, that water is fresh and clean and we're able to drink it. And so, having established the reasons for having policy, we can now turn to the different types of policy analysis, right? So, to reiterate, policy are formal government actions that are aimed at addressing a problem, and we have them to make sure that issues that arise in society are minimized, right? That problems don't affect many people, that the actions of one don't negatively impact the whole, etc. And when we are thinking about policy analysis, what we're beginning to do is think about two different things. So there is one concept that is the analysis of policy. So this is investigating existing policies and the reasons behind them. So this is what you guys will be doing in your project, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But this is when we, for example, look and we say, oh, we have in the state of Michigan a few years ago, an issue came up about affirmative action laws. So we already had affirmative action laws. And at this point in history, there was a push to investigate how those policies were actually playing out and whether it was necessary to keep them or not. Okay, so we're analyzing a policy that is already in existence to see what's happening. Sometimes we're looking at it historically to understand, were there motivations that we didn't understand at the time that we understand now that drove this policy? How should we behave moving forward? And so an example might be, that we might ask, why does Social Security exist, and what might happen if you tried to take it away? So you would look back at history and you might investigate, the reason that Social Security exists is that during and right after the Great Depression, our elderly were essentially destitute if they didn't have a family member that they could move in with. And we identified this as a real problem. And so we said, all right, we're not going to let our old people die on the streets. We're going to develop some sort of social safety net. And now, when we think about what might happen if you tried to take it away, there is a strong and very well organized group of senior citizens and soon-to-be retirees who would protest against that, who wouldn't have enough money to live, who are extremely organized, and who would likely make it very difficult to move that policy. The second type of policy analysis is analysis for policy. And so this attempts to offer insight into the best policy choice to address an issue. So this is when we're looking at a problem and we're thinking, what should we do about this problem? This is a problem that isn't currently being addressed, or maybe it's not being addressed adequately, and so we need to develop some type of new policy. And what is the best policy to address that issue? And so if we think about this in a current conversation or current issue that's really sort of hot, right, and important, A question might be, what should we do about rising inequality in this country? And then from that, we would ask, well, how would different policies affect the population? And what might happen if we didn't mean to happen if we implemented those policies? So these are the types of different types of questions that we would ask in an analysis of, an analysis for. And so when we ask this question, what is policy analysis? We answer it by saying this. So it's an evaluation. We are evaluating how different policies help achieve established goals. And then we're assessing. We're assessing how those policies impact diverse populations and seemingly unrelated issues. We're investigating how, after implementation, policies achieve their desired goals. And we're trying to understand how we came to identify an issue as a problem and whose definition of a problem reigns. Okay, so in the end, what policy analysis is the compilation of evidence, right? It's an evidence-based field. So this is not like chemistry, where you have, one element plus another element has a specific reaction that we can know every time this is going to happen. What we're doing in policy analysis is gathering evidence to try and understand an issue. And we are using our best understanding of the current situation. And so there is a lot of room for error and interpretation in policy analysis. There's also a lot of room to make things right. Some other issues that we might investigate are things like whether or not a policy has an unstated goal, whether those policymakers said that they were doing one thing, but really were doing it for a reason that they were keeping quiet. We might also think about the relationship between policy as it's written and policy as it's implemented, right, which are often different things. So there are many questions, many things to evaluate as we begin our policy analysis process. And so what policy analysis actually entails is the gathering of evidence using the scientific method to evaluate. So we evaluate the problem definition. And what do I mean by problem definition? In our next lecture, we're going to get into this in a fair amount of depth. But for the moment, it's sufficient to say that problem definition is the way that we think about an issue, who we identify as the victim of an issue or the perpetrator of the issue, who's to blame, why it's an issue, etc. We then evaluate what the policy alternatives are. And so if we're looking at a policy that's already been implemented, we might evaluate or try and understand alternatives that were not selected or alternatives that could be chosen in the future. And if we are looking at a new policy that hasn't yet been implemented, we might consider all of the different possibilities, right? There are typically multiple ways to address any given issue. And so a classic divide, for example, in stimulating the economy, and something that I'm sure we've all heard about a lot, the Democrats and the Republicans have different perspectives on how you achieve the same goal. So we all identify the problem as a lagging economy or a poor economy, but how you actually stimulate that economy, there are many different perspectives on this. And then after we've defined our problem and we've identified our policy alternatives, it comes down to decision making. So what policy is it that we're going to decide upon? And so it's not enough to just identify policy alternatives. We have to evaluate those policy alternatives. We do that in a number of ways, from cost-benefit analysis to evaluating the political feasibility of something, evaluating how realistic it is in terms of a technical perspective, etc. But in the end, we're looking to make a decision. After we've made that decision, we're going to implement the policy. And then, having implemented the policy or put the policy into practice, we're going to evaluate how well it's doing. So in this class, we are going to explore those key topics. To go back just a little bit, we're going to look at this in 3 units. Okay, we're going to look at problem definition, policy alternatives, and program evaluation. Now, this is an online course, obviously, but what that means is that it's a significantly shorter period of time, and it's much more self-directed than it would be if we were in an in-person class. And that means that there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders to make sure that you get out of this the most that you can. This is an applied course, and what I mean by that is that we are looking the whole time to try and give you not just a theoretical understanding of these topics, but to actually apply the theory to existing policy issues. And so we're going to do that in a way that builds tangible professional skills. I believe that I have set you up to succeed. There are many opportunities for you to think through, review, revise what it is that you're doing. Those opportunities are primarily available through your discussion posts, which we'll talk about in just a second. But you should be able to get a good grade in this class if you put the effort in. It's not an easy class. There are not a huge amount of requirements, but it does require you to have strong analytical skills and to be dedicated in your work, committed to your work. But if you do those things, you should succeed and do very well in this class. It's also designed to have you engage with your fellow students in meaningful ways. So because this class is online, you aren't actually going to engage with as many students as you would in an in-person class, but you are going to develop a working relationship with a partner who you will read and comment on their projects as you move forward. We'll talk about that in just a second. So I believe that my role as your instructor is to help you learn new material in an engaging online setting and to help prepare you for the professional world. Finally, I believe that it's my responsibility to help you understand how you learn and what you're interested in, right? We're not just here so that you can define a problem definition. We are here so that you can understand, is this an area that I would actually like to pursue? Is this a type of career I would like to have? Is this something that's worth going into greater depth with? Perhaps you'll get really enchanted by a policy area and think, oh, well, maybe I want to become a service provider, or, maybe I want to work in a corporate setting where we would be dealing with, trade law or something like that. So this is about you having some level of self-discovery about the things that you're interested in, and it's about me helping you have those experiences. We're going to do that to the best of our ability in this format. So in this class, we're going to work on a couple of professional skills. The first is professional writing. So one of your final products is going to be a policy memo or executive summary. This is a type of professional document that you would write in any policy analysis job. It's something that we're going to go over in greater depth in just a second, but you will also be expected to write on a weekly basis in your discussion posts and to write in a way that is maybe not as formal as professional writing, but that will certainly give you practice in terms of getting some exposure and practice in writing on a regular basis. You will be putting together professional visual presentation. And when I say presentation, I don't mean like a PowerPoint presentation. I mean presentation in sort of a broader term. You'll be putting together an infographic of the type that we see commonly in places like Time Magazine or The New Yorker, on various websites, etc. It's a visual depiction of an issue. You'll have to be working on project management. Over the course of this 7-week course, you are going to have to do independent research. You're going to have to do a fair amount of it. In order for you to be successful in this course, you're going to have to do it over the course of those 7 weeks. And so you will have to be able to manage that project to make sure that you are making adequate progress and that you are going to be able to complete all of the components of that assignment. You're also going to be working on numerical literacy. And what that means is understanding how to read tables and charts, how to understand statistics when you hear it. Obviously, this is not a math class. This is not a statistics class. This is about being a consumer of numbers. and understanding what people mean when they say that, 50% of women like bananas, or I don't know. That was a silly example, but you can get the picture. And finally, one of the skills that I believe is actually invaluable in any work setting is information synthesis. And that's something that you are going to have to do extremely well in your unit assessments or tests. So, I think that by the time that you finish this class, you will have strengthened your professional skills. You'll have tangible things that you can talk about in a job interview, particularly if you don't have other professional experiences and are looking to be employed in the future. It's really, I think, can be very useful to say, well, I did do project management in the classroom setting. Or I do understand information synthesis. I understand how to interpret statistics, etc. Okay, so now we're going to go over the key parts of this class. The first thing I want to point out to you is the class website. So we're going to actually do I'll do a screenshot for you in a minute about going through the actual website. But our class is hosted on Desire to Learn. That's d2l.msu.edu. All of your materials are available in a virtual format, including your required text. All lectures, assignments, and assessments are under content. And there are in-depth descriptions of all assignments with useful resources under the content assignment descriptions and resources. And so I want to actually just dwell on that point for just a second, because we are going to go over very briefly the required assignments for this class, but you should know that there are extremely detailed descriptions. And so if you have a question about these assignments or you're not clear what it is I'm talking about in this short lecture, the first place to go is to those descriptions. If you're still unclear after reading those descriptions, then of course email me. So let's get through the nitty-gritty first and talk about the policies of this class. So as I mentioned before, policies apply to any institution, and our class is an institution of sorts. So in this class, late work will not be accepted. Under very rare circumstances, these must be extreme circumstances, we might be able to negotiate late assignments. But this would have to be something like a family death or an extreme illness, something that was really, truly out of the student's control and kept them from being able to fulfill the requirements of this class. If you believe that you are in that situation, please email me immediately. Don't wait until final grades are being submitted to say that you had a terrible fall and have been in the hospital, and that you had a concussion and that you couldn't do the work and now you want to make it up. Email me as soon as whatever it is that's going on happens, and we'll try and work something out. Plagiarism and cheating will not be tolerated. So please know that you will fail the assignment if you are caught plagiarizing or cheating, but more importantly, you will be reported for further disciplinary action. Depending on whether or not you have any infractions, this can result in anything from having to take courses on academic honesty to being expelled from the university. So do not do this. In order to make sure that you understand what plagiarism is, you must email verification of passing the University of Indiana's plagiarism test to me before you can receive credit on any assignments. So there is a link on the D2L website to this test, which you need to take. If you are unfamiliar with plagiarism or what qualifies as plagiarism, there are also tutorials on that page. So you have no excuses. You should fully understand what plagiarism is by the time that you are finished taking that test. In terms of email, I will respond to you within 24 hours if you email me between Monday and Friday. So I do not respond to email on the weekends. So if you, for example, forgot to submit your test on a Friday and you are anxiously emailing me at midnight on Friday, waiting for me to respond, don't send me 13 emails. I won't be responding until Monday morning. I also don't respond to emails after 6 p.m. on weekdays, but you can expect that I will email you first thing in the morning. So I work regular business hours on this class, and so you can expect to hear from me during those hours. I have virtual office hours by appointment. So through D2L, there is a chat function. And so if you're having questions that are not being answered through email and you can't get through the syllabus or through the supporting documents, I am more than happy to have office hours with you. And we'll set up a time to chat. You'll be on the chat on your end, I'll be on the chat on my end, and we can actually have a little internet conversation. And finally, disabilities. If you have disabilities, please email me your visa if you need accommodations, and we'll work out whatever it is that you need accommodated. If you believe that you have disabilities but have not yet gone to the Disability Service Office, please read the full disability statement in the syllabus, which will outline to you how to go about contacting disability services. The required text is an e-course pack, which is $66.50. It is available for purchase through Desire to Learn. And to actually access that, you will go to Content, and under Content, there is a tab that says PLS 313 Electronic Course Pack Ordering Information. And you're going to follow the instructions on that. This is through MSU Course Materials, and they will send you an email with all of the specifics. But you'll purchase the text directly through our course website. So let's talk about course requirements. First of all, there are weekly readings and weekly lectures that you are expected to read and watch. But in more specific terms, in terms of assignments, we have a couple of things. So first of all, you will take a pre-class survey this week. You need to take it by Thursday. This is a completion grade worth 5% of your grade. And so this is a way for me to essentially get to understand who you guys are and what your needs are, what you already know. It's a way to help improve the class. I'll talk to you in more detail in a couple of slides about each of these assignments. You will have weekly discussion and response posts that are worth 19% of your grade in total. You will have a concept map, which takes the place of a cumulative exam. That will be worth 10% of your grade. You'll have 3 unit exams or unit assessments, 90 points each, 270 points total, so they make up 27% of your grade. What this means is that if you are not a good test taker, you can still do well in this class. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, this is a long answer and open note. And so in terms of testing strategies, I think that it's one of the more accessible forms of testing. You will have a policy memo that's worth 20% of your grade that will be based off of independent research. And you will create a policy infographic worth 14% of your grade that will be based on that same independent research. So let's talk about these assignments in more detail. Oh, and finally, you will take, a post-class survey, also a completion grade worth 50 points. So lectures. You're required to watch lectures. There'll be 2 to 3 lectures each week. So again, remember that each week of this course is 3 weeks in a traditional semester. So that would be 6 class periods. So there's a lot crammed into each week. Lectures are best viewed after completing the reading. And lectures are going to be in this video format. This allows me to capture the entire screen and show you videos and other things. This introductory presentation is probably the most boring, the least interactive that we'll have. But if you don't have video capabilities, I believe everyone who has a computer should have them. But nonetheless, if you're having difficulty watching the video, there's also just a straight PowerPoint that you can flip through. And important to note that unit assessments or tests will be based on the content of both the lectures and the reading, so make sure you're doing both. Readings, again, are required weekly. They cover both theoretical concepts and applications of concepts to real policy issues. They range from 30 to 90 pages per week. But in weeks 4 through 7, you're going to be on the lighter end so that you have a little more time to do that independent research. As I mentioned with the surveys, there are two of them, a pre-class and an end-of-class survey. The pre-class survey must be completed by Thursday the 15th. The end-of-class survey is completed by June 26th. So these are both completion grades, which means that your answers will not affect your grade or performance in this class in any way. You must do the survey, you must answer all the questions, but what you say in those questions don't affect your grade. But because they don't affect your grade, I really ask you to be honest. This is the best way I have of getting to know you and getting to understand what it is that you need from this class. Your next assignment is a weekly discussion post. So you will do a discussion post during weeks 1 through 6. You have one discussion post and one response post each week. So the discussion post must be posted by Thursday and the response post must be posted by Sunday. These are all by 11:59 p.m. Your response post will be to the same person every week. So you have been assigned a discussion partner. You can identify who your partner is by going to the discussion partner document under content, assignment descriptions, and resources. And then within that folder, there's a subfolder called discussion posts. And that document is in there. So every week you're going to post and your discussion partner is going to respond to your post. You'll respond to their post. If your partner does not post for the week, you still need to create a response post. And so you will just choose another student to respond to. But saying, hey, my partner didn't post is not an excuse for not doing a response post. Your discussion posts will be based on discussion prompts that are found under each week's content and also under the communication tab, communication, discussion, and then you'll see each week's discussion prompts. The prompts require you to apply course concepts to your research topic. And what this means is that you must be making progress on your research. And so this first week, your post is just an introduction to your partner, and you need to pick the topic that you're going to be researching. For the subsequent weeks, you'll need to be making progress, gaining some understanding of your policy topic because you'll be asked specific questions about that. You can view your discussion posts now so that you can prepare for what will be coming up in the future. Unit assessments. So these are essentially exams. You have them on the 2nd, 4th, and 6th Fridays of this term. Each test has 5 long answer questions. And so what I mean by that is these are longer than a short answer, but shorter than an essay. So if an essay would be 3 or 4 pages, a long answer question is about a page. The assessment will be open for 24 hours. So from midnight to 11:59 p.m. on a Friday, the exam will be opened. It will close at midnight on Saturday, meaning 12 a.m. on Saturday. Once you begin, you will have 1 hour to complete the assessment. Now it's open note, but because of the time limit, you should be well prepared before you ever sit down to take that assessment. Your policy memo is due June 25th, so that's the last week of class. You will choose a policy that you're interested in to research. Now, if you can't think of a policy off the top of your head, you can pick a problem that you are interested in. So, for example, let's say that you were interested in gay marriage. And I use the word problem very loosely, right? I mean an issue. So you pick the issue of gay marriage. You don't really know anything about it, let's say. And so in your first week, you'd begin to read up on the issue and you would pick a policy that you would want to investigate. So maybe you would decide that you want to investigate the federal government's Defense of Marriage Act. And so you're going to pick that very specific policy. Whether you choose a policy this week or you choose a problem this week, your project must be on a policy. So you're going to have to identify a specific policy in a specific location that you're going to research. In your research, you're going to investigate the problem or issue that has prompted the policy itself, and the outcomes of that policy. So to continue the example of same-sex marriage, If we were looking at DOMA, or the Defense of Marriage Act, the problem as defined by those people who actually passed the legislation would be that they believed that same-sex marriage would threaten the traditional family and the traditional marriage that was protected by the government. And so they identified that as an issue that needed policy to overcome. All right, so they developed the policy of DOMA, which kept the federal government from being able to recognize same-sex marriage and also allowed states to not recognize same-sex marriage from other states. And over time, this has had numerous outcomes, from creating a both anti-marriage and pro-marriage political movement to making it very difficult for same-sex couples to have the same rights as other couples or have the same benefits as other couples. So if you were doing this research, you would be investigating each of those dimensions. You'll read 20 to 25 academic and journalistic sources on your topic. If you don't know what an academic or journalistic source is, there is a document under the explanation of, I believe the tab is called Description of Assignments and Resources. So you can open that policy memo tab, and there is a Research 101 document that's going to highlight and show you how you actually go about doing independent research, where you find academic and journalistic sources. This is also an issue that I'm happy to answer email questions about or have office hours about. You'll look for information, analysis, and visuals, and you're going to then have to condense that information into a 2 to 3 page single-spaced policy memo or executive summary. For those of you unfamiliar with the executive summary, in that same description and resources file, there's also a document that explains how to write an executive summary. But essentially, the way that you're going to think about this is that if the President of the United States or the CEO of a major company had only 15 minutes to read a document, and they needed to understand all of the important dimensions of a policy in that document, what would you tell them? Okay, so you're going to pick key facts and analysis to be able to help them to understand the issue. Using that same research, you are going to develop an infographic. So you're going to use the same policy and research that you used from the policy memo. You're going to collect a minimum of 10 visuals that capture the essence of your problem, policy, and outcomes. So an infographic, we're going to look at an example on the next slide. But this is a visual depiction of an issue. These are the types of things you see them a lot in magazines like Time Magazine or The Economist or The New Yorker. You also see them on websites a lot. But it's a way to essentially provide the viewer with a lot of information in a very short space and a very short period of time. And so you're looking, as you're doing your research, for statistics, charts, graphs, pictures, and large quotes, tables, etc. that are telling your story. So you don't need to make each of these 10 visuals, but you will need to make the compiled infographic. And you'll need to organize them and put them in a way that tells your story. And then you're going to write a 250-word caption describing your infographic. So again, there are much more explicit directions in the description folders, and I encourage you to go immediately and read those so that you understand what is expected of you. So this is an example of an infographic. This is an infographic of an infographic, right? And so you see here you have pie charts, you have tables, you have enlarged quotes, you have a thematic word visual, you have a variety of other sources, and if you looked and read each of these different things, you'd be able to understand the story of infographics. And so this is what you're going for. In the resources folder, there is a document that provides a couple of different websites where that are free, that make making an infographic easier. You don't need to use one of those pieces of software or websites, but if you don't want to just do it in PowerPoint or something, you can certainly use those. Finally, you are going to make a concept map, and this is due the last week, June 24th. and it takes the place of a cumulative final. So each of the assessments that you will take up to this point will require you to mostly answer questions about the unit we've just covered, though there is some sort of synthesis between units as well. But it's not really a cumulative final in a traditional sense. So the concept map is a simplified model that represents how you understand the relationship between course concepts. So this is a visual depiction of your understanding, and you're going to use keywords, pictures, connecting words, lines, etc. to create essentially a diagram that shows how you understand these concepts being related. Now, I give you the primary keywords that you need to incorporate into your concept map, but how those things are related and the connecting words you use, etc., are up to you. So this is what a concept map looks like. This is one example. There are many examples in that resources resources folder, and you can also just Google concept map. Many things come up. So I want to really, really make this clear. Do not email me questions until you have thoroughly read the syllabus and read all assignment explanations. There are many questions that you will have that will be answered in those documents. And if you ask one of those questions, I will simply refer you back to those documents. So save yourself and me some time. Make sure you read those first. So to make sure we're all on the same page, the requirements for this week. So you have the readings are the Introduction to Policy Analysis, Causal Stories, and the Case Study on Immigration. Then you have to watch lectures, the introduction, which you're watching right now. Good job. The problem definition and causal stories. Problem definition and causal stories is actually one lecture, and then the next lecture applies causal stories to the case of immigration. You need to complete your pre-class survey by May 15th. That's Thursday. You need to complete your plagiarism test by May 15th. And then you need to do your discussion post by May 15th as well. So 3 things for Thursday. Your pre-class surgery. Don't have any pre-class surgery. Sorry. Your pre-class survey, your plagiarism test, your discussion post. And then your response post needs to be completed by May 18th. So now let's take just a couple of seconds and go ahead and look at D2L. I thought that I had this open, but evidently I closed it. So this is going to open, and I want to just make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay, so when you sign on to D2L, you're going to come to your course home. And this is obviously updating, but there are a couple of things that I want to point out to you. So the first thing that you're going to look at is the content. So you see that there's a table of contents to the left, and when you click on a particular item, you can see what's inside of it. So your syllabus, here's your syllabus, make sure you read it. Your assignment descriptions, I've mentioned these about 8 times. And so you can see all of the different assignments here. So your discussion post, this explains your discussion post. Here's your partner list. I mentioned to you that there are some resources in here. So for example, in your policy memo, you have the explanation of the assignment, you have how to write an executive summary, you have doing research 101, etc. Rubrics. So you will be graded on a rubric for both the policy memo and the infographic. Those are available here under this rubric. And I would highly recommend you look at those right away so that you understand what you'll be evaluated on. This is where you actually will go ahead and purchase your course pack through. So you'll just follow the link to the instructions, follow the instructions. And then there is a tab for each week. So here in week 1, we see the pre-class survey, we see our discussion topic for week 1, and we see the plagiarism test. So under each week, you will have listed the things that are required for that week. So no excuses that you didn't know something was there and required. But you can also access those same things through these upper tabs. So under assessments, we see that you can access quizzes, which is where your assessments will be, your rubrics. Actually, don't look at rubrics. That's not the way it is. But surveys, Under communication, here's where your discussions are. Here's where the chat is if you want to end up having some online office hours with me. So a lot of useful things. In terms of turning in your assignments, Dropboxes, there are Dropboxes set up for you to turn in each of your assignments. So there's a concept map Dropbox, a policy memo Dropbox, and infographic Dropbox. These Dropboxes are also under those weekly tabs as well, but you can access them in many ways. One final thing, so you can actually see your grades as we go along under this assessments grades. Okay, so obviously there are no items entered yet. So on mine, it's just going to show me how to set up the grade book. But when you go to look at that after your first assignment, you'll actually see your grades. Okay, so I think that is all for right now. And I will look forward to talking to you again very soon. And in our next lecture, we'll be talking about problem definition and causal stories.